Palestine really is an issue that, if you really broke it down, it aligns with every value that we have in the movement. It's all about the sanctity of life, right? It's the centering of the indigenous people and their lands. It is about environmentalism. It is about children thriving, right? Ending poverty, letting people have self-determination. Like, this is all the things that we fight for. It's about freedom. The Palestinian people deserve freedom, just like Black people in America deserve freedom, and migrants and others deserve freedom.
Hola, hola. Welcome to El Calentón nuevamente. This is a Latinx podcast about current issues, news, culture, music, food, and politics. Y todos los hot takes that we call El Calentón. Some episodes, como este, will be for all of you, and others will be exclusive for Mijente members. So if you're not a member yet, vete para mijente.net/join and become a member today. So, hello, Cynthia, maravillosa, desde Chicago, ¿cómo estás?
It's so good to be back with you, Ali. Y aquí en Chicago, donde ya huele a primavera, casi verano.
Qué rico. Pues acá en Puerto Rico, it's been raining a lot, and if you all see como hormigas voladoras, eso es un efecto natural de los días de lluvia acá en Puerto Rico cuando hace calor después. So that will be happening. In this episode, we will be talking about Palestine, what's been going on en los pasados 200 días. We know that it started way before that, but it's important to have the context of where we're at right now with this. Y para ese contexto y un poco de noticias recientes, Cynthia nos va a llevar por eso.
Thank you. So we're so excited. Today we have a special guest that's going to be interviewed by our Executive Director, Marisa Franco, here at Mijente. But just to ground us a little bit as we go into that conversation, I wanted to share that, we know that in the past 6-7 months, many media outlets and social media platforms have been covering what's happening in different ways. We're talking about the occupation of Palestine by Israel through Zionism, through settler colonialism, through the ongoing exile of so many of our Palestinian brothers and sisters and siblings. And so we've seen social media platforms flooded with images from the ground of folks having to document their own genocide, but also of incredible moments of solidarity and support across the globe that continue. And on the flip side of that, again, of also disinformation and propaganda and the opinions, or so-called opinions, of international leaders. And so we're entering this episode thinking about the ongoing censorship that we've seen recently through, for instance, the resolution that condemns the slogan, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," right? Which we know speaks to a free Palestine, from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. But we've seen the powers that be actually invoking false claims of, for example, anti-Semitism to repress those efforts and to repress the movement in solidarity with Palestine, Palestinian resistance. And this is all part of much larger efforts of repression that we've seen here in the US, but not just here, right, all over the world. And so this is actually the same condemnation that we heard in recent times by the White House directed towards the students, particularly in Columbia, setting up encampments at their schools, right? One of many schools in solidarity with Palestinian struggle. Students, faculty, staff at several campuses that have been organizing under this banner of the Popular University for Gaza, and that have this real demand of what it means and what it's going to take for schools and institutions to divest funds, to cut institutional ties with Israel, with companies complicit in genocide. And so we're going to hear from our special guest and Marisa about questions and an analysis around what it means to continue to resist in our current moment, especially when these efforts of repression that are violent as well attempt to gloss over the violence in Palestine of, for instance, raids in recent weeks that caused some of the worst destruction in the West Bank in decades, that have glossed over bodies hidden by Israel in mass graves. And so we know that people of conscience are going to continue to resist, and we're keeping an eye on that.
Yes, 100%. And I think it's very shocking to see this every day on social media ocurriendo en nuestros ojos y no tener las herramientas, ¿verdad? Para detenerlo, feeling powerless, feeling dystopic, porque everything keeps moving, you keep going to work, you keep having these responsibilities. También estamos in an electoral year, so there's all these messages to go out and vote and support candidates, and it feels very strange to make choices like that, de gente que está en el poder, de gente que está enabling que este genocidio siga ocurriendo. So I think that that's very important that que lo establezcamos y que sigamos teniendo estas conversaciones. So we're very grateful to pass the mic now to our Executive Director, Marisa Franco en Tucson, que está interviewing a Linda Sarsour. Así que vamos para allá.
Saludos, greetings. My name is Marisa Franco. I'm with Mijente, and today I'll be doing an interview with Brooklyn-born Palestinian-Muslim-American organizer Linda Sarsour. Linda is an author, a mother of three. I could roll down the bio, but one of the things I will say is that Linda has been at the forefront of what I would consider some of the most. She is someone who has been at the forefront of many insurgent campaigns and movements, from the Women's March to the Bernie Sanders campaign for president, to now what's happening with respect to the demand globally for a ceasefire in Gaza, in Palestine. But also I think it's important to note that Linda has also done that diligent, that slow work, building at the local level, building organizations at both the local and national level, and being a stalwart champion of the Arab and Muslim community here in the United States. So thank you so much for joining us today, Linda.
Thank you so much, Marisa. I'm so honored to be here with you.
Likewise, thank you for taking the time, and long time no see. We've kind of we've ran into each other at different points throughout the years, and it's been dope to reconnect, particularly in this time. And I could say, man, going on a panel with you, it's like a rodeo. I don't know what you're gonna.
I speak off the cuff. Whatever I'm feeling in that second, that's where I'm going.
Just like I like it. Well, let's dive in. So, one of the things when we caught up a few weeks ago, you talked about the organic nature of this moment and what's happening. So in that vein, what do you see as emerging, right? There's been different chapters, right, since October, and flows and the way like virality moves. What do you see emerging right now in terms of tactics? What are the emerging sites of struggle?
It has been devastating and heartbreaking to watch this genocide unfold before our very eyes in the last almost 7 months now. And even through all that darkness, Marisa, I'm seeing something incredible, like things that I dreamed of for the many years I've been organizing, over 2 decades. I watched at the beginning the left and the center, basically, or the center progressives, which never seem to find a place to agree, get together and have one clear message, which is ceasefire now, permanent ceasefire now. So to watch all the elements decenter themselves and their ideologies to center the people of Gaza and say, we want to see an end to this bloodshed now. And seeing that call from the protest movement to the political movement was incredible to watch. That means that we have the potential to organize, to come together around principles and values where we align. So that, for me, that tactic of coordinated messaging that decenters our egos, decenters our kind of political ideologies, and centers the most marginalized people, it works. Although we have not gotten a permanent ceasefire yet, just that becoming a mainstream demand and being something that we hear in literally every echelon of public sector, private sector, it's been just remarkable to watch. The other thing I'm seeing is this resurgence of the anti-war movement. Mm-hmm. This is a long tradition in this country. Those who opposed the war in Vietnam, those who opposed the war in Iraq, and just seeing that reemergence. But what I see different this time, it is beautiful. It is intergenerational. It is intersectional. It is Black and brown. It is indigenous led. It is incredible to see that. I think for the first time in a long time, not only do I see the resurgence of an anti-war movement, I see a sustainability of it. And that for me has been hope. The tactics of this particular last 7 months have been incredible. Anywhere from the mobilization and mass protests that we have seen on the streets of almost every city in this country, it's also on the political front as well, whether it's through the uncommitted campaigns across the country, whether it's supporting pro ceasefire candidates all across the country and watching people be motivated around this idea to participate in democracy around this issue that is really moving people, whether it's mass civil disobedience, whether it's movements coming together to develop the intersections between what's happening in Gaza and how that actually is connected to so many broader issues and struggles around the world, from the Congo to Sudan, to the connection of the military industrial complex, even looking at things like climate and how what's happening, the devastation around environmentalism in Gaza is also connected to a larger world that is fighting not just for people, but for our earth. So the tactics, literally this movement is using every tactic at its disposal: corporate accountability, corporate responsibility. I mean, for me, I'm blown away. Student activism. I have spent the weekend with Columbia students.
Yeah, that's been popping
I'm
up.
I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the bravery of these students that are have very clear principles. You are not allowed to enter the encampment without adhering to guidelines of respect and dignity of all people involved in the encampment. No alcohol, no drugs, no bringing substances into the space, no weapons, no people saying you have to clean up after yourself and make sure this continues and remains to be a clean and safe environment for all. And then we're watching the literal wildfire of campuses across the country following
Hmm.
suit. And it's just incredible. Like, I feel honored to be alive today to witness all this happening.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been something that's felt unprecedented. And it, as you were talking, it also, you know, definitely in my own political upbringing, like ideological upbringing, Palestine was something I learned about and was very clear to understand being where I'm from. But it made me think of shouting out, because this moment is unprecedented in many ways. The demand has gone mainstream, but the bigger question, the Palestinian question, has actually reached a scale that did not have that same level of understanding in our movement or in communities across the country. So it just made me want to shout out, in Mijente, Sofia Campos, Maria Lazaba, her two compañeras who have brought the issue of Palestine, whether it's in workshops, or just really bringing it in before it became this kind of thing. So shout out to those compas.
Yes.
Um,
Arts.
so leaning in on the uncommitted piece. So, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, I know New Jersey's coming up. Um, you've also had your soirees in the electoral arena. What did you notice in that particular chapter, like that particular tactic? What were your noticings, and what do you think the next phase is following the primary season with respect to the presidential election, the upcoming general election?
Well, I'll start here, Marisa. People were outraged at us
Yeah.
when incredible people came up with this idea that Michigan's primary was coming up on February 27th. This was like in the end of January, where people kind of came to this idea. And at that time, as you know, we were already almost 4 months into the genocide, and people were like, nothing's changing, nothing's moving. This administration continues to double down. And
Right.
Michigan, as you know, is a swing state, and Michigan has a very sizable Arab and Muslim population, and of course, a lot of allies when it comes to issues impacting those very communities. And so the people started saying, oh, hell no, we will
Hmm.
not participate in this democracy. We will not feed into a system that is devaluing the human life of Palestinian people. We will not go vote in a primary. We're not going to engage at all. And the idea of uncommitted, what people have to understand is that I feel a responsibility to make sure that my people do not forfeit their right to participate in democracy. I don't care what the opposition is doing. I don't care what the empire is doing. This is a democracy that somebody or some people fought and died for so that we could participate in it. And we have to realize that we could be creative in using the democratic system to actually send political messages to those in power. So the idea of uncommitted was very simple. on the Michigan ballot, both the Democratic and Republican ballot, there is a choice that you have, an actual box that says uncommitted. And it speaks directly to where
Yeah,
our people are. We are uncommitted to this administration. Just like you're uncommitted to us, we are uncommitted to you.
basically. Yeah.
And what's important to understand about uncommitted is that if you get a 15% threshold in any of the districts, you actually get delegates. So this is not just a numbers game, it's an opportunity to actually send people inside of the DNC to kind of put forth our own platforms. And so in the state of Michigan, with almost no money, as you know, because our movements are always under resourced, especially these types of big ideas that,
Particularly in this
especially
case.
in this case, lots of the democracy voters
Yeah.
democracy owners are not happy, right, with this strategy. Minimum resources, but a lot of passion and a lot of energy. So we were able to redirect some of the mobilizations in Michigan into this electoral work, and it was remarkable. I think people should be proud. They should be impressed that you can take mass mobilization and actually translate that into some sort of political power. And so over 104,000 people in the state of Michigan. And that doesn't even count the people who went to the polls and voted for example, Marianne Williamson, who they saw as a pro ceasefire candidate. But I'm talking just the people who voted uncommitted, somewhere close to about 104,000 people. Now, remember, this is a non-competitive primary. Like
Right.
Joe Biden was going to win the primary. So the people of Michigan are not in a competitive primary here. So the fact that 104,000 people got up, went to the polls, and voted uncommitted tells me that they are committed to the cause. And it was
Right.
remarkable. And it was wildfire. Then we went to Minnesota, Hawaii Democratic caucuses. I mean, we got more delegates in Hawaii than we got in Michigan. That's just how powerful this campaign was. And as you know, it continues to move around the country. Now, as you know, we have primaries coming up in uncommitted primaries that are coming up in Maryland, and then we end it with New Jersey on June 4th. In New Jersey, not only is New Jersey have an uncommitted campaign, they had to run delegates in order to get signatures,
Right.
get delegates on the actual ballot, which is more work than any other state had to do. And their delegates are called the Justice for Palestine delegates. Like the amount of history that's being made, like this is going down in history. Like somebody 40 years from now is going to be able to look at the June 4th New Jersey primary and see Palestine on a ballot. So it's remarkable on every level. And I keep telling democracy donors and other movement people and folks that are close to the Democratic Party, you should see this as power building, as actually developing political power, as keeping the people engaged in the process. Because what we could do is just let the people give up, as they have done many times before. And we are saying, no, we have an opportunity to participate and send a message, and that's what we're doing. And we've seen some shift in rhetoric since the uncommitted campaign started. All of a sudden, Joe Biden, after the Michigan primary, was like, oh, guess what? I could drop some aid on Gaza. So you were waiting for 4 months while people were starving, and you didn't know that you could drop aid, which of course we still think is an undignified way of ever bringing any support to people. Then a few days after that, Kamala went to Selma for the commemoration of Bloody Sunday. All of a sudden, Kamala had ceasefire in her vocabulary. She had never said ceasefire before. All of a sudden, she was using the terminology of the movement. So little by little, we're seeing some rhetoric. We are just now waiting for the actions that match that rhetoric.
Exactly. Speaking of the rhetoric, I had a follow-up, but I'm going to go to the rhetoric question because the rhetoric is also shifting not only inside of the Biden campaign, but I've noticed recently rhetoric shifting inside of the Trump campaign. Specifically, there was an article a couple weeks ago where Trump was quoted basically, and this is not a quote because he obviously didn't say it like this, but basically, Bibi, need to wrap it up. You need to wrap this up. And in the rally, I think last weekend, where Trump was speaking, the crowd itself was yelling "Genocide Joe," and you could see a little tickle. A little Trump seemed tickled, and it made me really also think about, there is this pressure on Biden to do something to actually move in the right direction and to support the call for a ceasefire and to move in that direction and use his power to make that happen. But then there's this piece around Trump, and it really made me think, what if they actually take up this mantle? And so, question for you is, what if they do that, and what do you think is the potential impact, and do you believe it?
You know what? been telling people, Marisa, is that there are no communities that know more than the ones you and I come from of how bad Trump is. So
Right.
we, as two communities, of course, diverse communities within our communities, we don't need people to lecture us about how bad Donald Trump is. We know it because we lived it, we understand it, the policies that impacted our people directly, whether you're talking about immigrant, refugee communities, migrant communities, Muslim ban, you already know, we could go, the list can go on. So we know
Mhm.
that. So I just want to establish that we're all on the same page, that Trump is bad for the communities that we come from. But remember, not every voter, Marisa, is an organizer. Not every voter is someone who is tapped into the political landscape. Not everyone is reading the news in the same way that we read the news and that we're following up in the same way we are. Most voters vote based on emotion. They vote based on what moves them in that moment. We are always trying to be strategic with our vote, right? Pragmatic with our vote. But ordinary people, that's not how they operate. And that's just normal human behavior. And so, what I worry about, to your point, is that Donald Trump starts leaning into this, right? And his campaign tells him, you might be able to get a slither here and a slither there, and you might want to just drop this statement here, say this one thing here. And yes, that may move some voters. And what I keep telling people, it's not the fault of the voters, right? It's not our fault. This is back into the ball of the court of Joe Biden and his administration and his campaign. Don't give that opening to Donald Trump. Don't give him the space to believe that at somehow, some way, he's going to portray himself as some champion for the Palestinian people or something of that sort, because we know that's not going to be true. Our people are not naive, but I think what it will move people to do is to, as they say, stick it to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
If that means Joe Biden gets to, quote, learn a lesson, that is what some voters and the sentiment is out there. The people are in the streets are not saying, oh, we're going to not vote for Joe Biden and vote for Trump because we think Trump is better. They're saying we want to teach a lesson to the Democrats. And so the question to the Democrats is, are you willing to risk your reelection? Are you willing to risk this democracy for Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu? That's their question. It's not the question to the voters. And I think there's so much responsibility that is put on us as a movement and us as organizers and leaders, and also on the individual voters, that's taking away the real responsibility that comes from the candidate who's supposed to earn the votes of our people. And so we could do the work. We could do all the political education that we want, but people are listening to the rhetoric. People are looking for actions. Just most recently, Marisa, Congress is sending another $26 billion in aid to the state of Israel. For God's sakes, my friends, it is a full-fledged genocide. There's massacres happening every day in Gaza. Literal babies are being saved from the wombs of their dead mothers. And then on top of that, you want to give them another $26.4 billion during an active genocide that people are watching. Then the White House, after that, the White House comes out with a statement condemning college students across America who are engaging in what they're calling these encampments to hold their universities accountable, which, Marisa, is something historically that has been done on ending the war in Vietnam, on ending South African apartheid. Like, these kids are not doing something brand new. They are in a long-standing historic tradition of encampments and holding universities accountable. So every time I'm
Correct.
like, okay, then the administration shuts down any progress of moving forward. Because you know what? I keep telling them, and I'm going to tell you and tell everybody, the ball is in Joe Biden and his campaign's court. It is not in my court. My job is to build power in my community. And right now, my message is down the ballot, my friends. Your state legislators are engaging in some of the most outrageous, draconian policies against marginalized people that we've seen in
Mhm.
decades. It is the all politics is local. We need to send all of our pro ceasefire anti-war candidates back to Congress. That is my assignment. My assignment is send the squad back to Congress. That is what I'm focused on. And if Joe Biden wants the votes of young people, he shouldn't be condemning students on college campuses. If you want the votes of Arab, Muslim, Palestinian communities, get an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I don't know if he can. I don't know if it's salvageable at this point. But look, you got a couple of months, get some bold actions and start actually doing something.
Yeah, and that piece around the looking at the down ballot, I also there's obviously millions and millions of dollars that are going to be mobilized to go after the squad. I've also seen, and I think in many ways electoral politics for the section of the movement that you and I come out of, it definitely has not usually been our cup of tea. But you go into it, and so I think there's a piece to me that I think are just underscore there that there is a lot of pressure and rightful pressure at the local level, state level, at the congressional level for people to support the call for ceasefire. And in all of those levels, people will face a backlash. And I think that this particular piece around protecting the squad, I hope that folks at the local level who have pushed for it also step up when there have been folks at the local level who have taken that position, and will most definitely face some kind of backlash for it. And I think that that's something to me that in the even when you think defund the police and the all the mobilizing that happened around the killing of George Floyd, and the same similar piece of like taking asking folks to take a position, but then there's think of police unions and the power they have in this country and at the local level. And so I think that's something that our movement has to develop a stronger muscle around, because these people, it's about people, it's about going out and knocking doors, but it's also about the money and the resources piece. um
Absolutely. And one thing I wanted to add, Marisa, is that
Dale.
it's a long-standing debate, as you know, because our movements centering marginalized people is a bit broader ideologically than maybe the right is. And so what happens is for a long time we had people saying this two-party system is corrupt. This system doesn't do anything. Voting is not how we're going to be liberated, which is 100% factually true. Like we are not going to be free at the ballot box. But I think what we're learning over the years is that, yes, we will not get free at the ballot box, but what we will do is alleviate some harm and at some point
Exactly.
develop some accountability. So, right now, what I think the movement is learning as they're watching more aid being sent to a state committing a genocide, as we're watching the way in which foreign policy is being administered in other parts of the world against brown and black people, I think finally, even all the way on the left, people are realizing, wait a minute, in the meantime, we can fire and hire at least some members of Congress or people on the local level, or to your point, support champions who are in city council, who are helping to pass local ceasefire resolutions and are taking a lot of heat, school board members and leaders of school boards. So that's the place where I'm seeing a little hope, that I think the movement is starting to understand that it's not about we're going to get liberation through the ballot box, but it's in the meantime, as we develop an electoral system that actually does work for the people and is more diverse politically, as we have opportunities for more viable, third, fourth, fifth, sixth parties, which is going to be a long-term project that we have to commit to. We can't just say it, we got to do it. I think right now people are realizing that electoral politics is a tool in the toolbox that we need to be accessing more.
Exactly. And that elections, and for good, bad, or ugly, are a depiction of where we're at. And it is wholly inadequate, the choice we have for president this year. And at the end of the day, we are not choosing who we're gonna roll with. It's not a test of alignment. It is what is the terrain you want to organize in. Um and I think, just to underscore for, absolutely right. The question of, you know, presidential elections is a time where the greatest amount of people in this country take some form of political action. Like the vast majority of people are not following the nuances and the here's and the there's. So absolutely true. And I think this for me also is a teachable moment for people that are a little bit more involved in politics and are consider themselves activists. And I think that, it is a difficult moment. It is a difficult, political thicket we're in many ways, where we're facing Trump and we're facing, real disappointment about Joe Biden. And he will try to construct an anti-Trump coalition the way he did in 2020. And inside of that, our communities are often taken for granted, and the progressive movement is taken as a given. And so
Mhm.
I will say emphatically that, you know, I understand that we're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time and figure out how to thread the needles and insert any other metaphor you would like. But what you all are doing and what folks are doing across the country is absolutely necessary, because if we can't hold the tension of pressuring and actually holding the tension of pressuring someone and knowing that there might be consequences all the way around, But if we're doing that for the right reason, for just reasons, then that's what the hell we got. That's what we got to do.
That's
And
right.
so, just want to underscore that. And also for folks that do consider themselves activists and, politically conscious in this moment and moving, um, we're going to have to figure out how to navigate this. And it's very, very tricky. Um, so my last question in that vein is just thinking about this, and this is something we've talked about, and something that we've shared our particular concerns. Is there is a lot of crises, and in this moment, globally and in our communities, there are things that feel like calamity, and it is amidst social demographic change in this country, and we are, I believe, in a period of backlash and reentrenchment of the people and the forces that have believed to be at the top of the mountain, if you get what I mean. And I sometimes wonder and fear that, our movement it obviously lacks resources, it lacks infrastructure, but also we lack division of labor, and we lack, real talk sometimes, and courageous conversations where we're actually saying the hard things and having the political debates, but staying in the room. And I sometimes am concerned because there is so much pain. There is so much pain right now. Um, and so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on it, and what you think is the ways that we can both, understanding that there's different issues people are working on, people are at different parts of the region, people view this political question differently. Um, how do we come out of this with a more united movement if what we need is a multiracial, multinational front to actually transform this country?
One thing I want to say, Marisa, is to all my sister communities, as you know, like I'm one of those people, like I will show up wherever there are people who are hurt and harmed. I don't care who those people are. And I do sometimes feel inadequate in this moment because I haven't been able to do that in the same way that I want to in the last 7 months, because I know that there are people hurting and there are so many calamities and crises right here in this country. I want to be able for people to have some sort of grace in this movement. We don't have grace in this movement. That's the problem.
Hmm.
The real essence of what I have experienced over the last 22 years is that we lack grace. And for me, like right now in this moment as a Palestinian American, I cannot see beyond genocide. And I know that there are so many people hurting, but I have to, for the first time in a long time, really center myself and center my heart and my people who are being slaughtered in this moment. And I think oftentimes, instead of people being empathetic to that, people say, oh, you're being a one issued person right now. Oh, you are ignoring that there are so many issues that are harming, our allies and people even within my own community who are also being impacted by other issues outside of Palestine. And sometimes I tell people that we have to have grace for people who are being harmed right now in this moment. Like when people are if you're under the fire right now, it is hard for you to look beyond the fire that is engulfing you in this moment. So that's the first thing, that we shouldn't be criticizing anyone in our movement by saying, oh, all of a sudden you dropped all these marginalized communities and all of a sudden you're on Palestine. There's a genocide. There's mass murder being done with our taxpayer dollars. And the intersection between the genocide that's happening in Palestine, the military funding that's happening in Palestine, the ways in which corporations in the United States are complicit in what's happening in genocide, is also connected to policing in America. It's connecting to immigration detention, right? We're also watching the ways in which this political environment around this one issue is pinning up, for example, immigrant communities, border communities, migrants coming to this country with this issue of Palestine, Israel. As you saw in the funding bill, this idea was like, we'll give you funding for Israel as long as you put more money on the border and you continue to criminalize more migrants and immigrants at the border. So I keep telling, what I've learned over time is that it's not that Palestine is the most important issue, but because we're seeing and we're experiencing a full-fledged genocide, there's an opportunity to look at this particular issue and actually see the intersections of climate justice, of migration, of borders, of immigration, of the military industrial complex, of the priorities that this country has, that is not only implemented internationally, but also is being implemented right here. I mean, there are Black Palestinians, for example, right? People forget that if you watch some of the videos of the children, they are blonde with blue eyes and they are Black as if they were from Africa. Like, we are a very diverse community that has been colonized many times before. And so that's one. The second thing is that there's a lot of chastising in our movement. We're very good at pointing fingers and saying that's not the right strategy. These people are being reckless. These people, this is not how we're going to be a community that comes together, right? As long as I always say people, as long as each person engaging in a tactic is doing it for the right reason and they have the same goal at the end, that's all that matters. And we always knew this, Marisa, from every movement. You always need the Dr. Kings and the Malcolm X's, right? Because Malcolm X was like, listen, you deal with Dr. King or you got to deal with me. You could make your choice, right? And so people can actually leverage the passion, power, and energy of this movement by saying, listen to these people, because these are the people you're going to have to deal with if you don't get yourself together.
Mhm.
So I'm my call to our movement is that Palestine really is an issue that if you really broke it down, it aligns with every value that we have in the movement. It's all about the sanctity of life, right? It's the centering of the indigenous people and their lands. It is about environmentalism. It is about, uh, you know, children thriving, right? Ending poverty, letting people have self-determination. Like, this is all the things that we fight for. It's about freedom. The Palestinian people deserve freedom, just like Black people in America deserve freedom, and
Mhm.
migrants and others deserve freedom. So again, I think there has to be courageous conversation. One of the things that I realized in this movement we're a part of, because we are all resourced by philanthropy and others, is that there's different people that, people decide who gets to be on the table. And
Mhm.
oftentimes the ones that will bring the courageous conversation, that will challenge our movements to actually be better and become more of a movement that wins, are not at the table, because people don't like the people who come and ask those challenging questions. And I think that that is a major deficiency of our movement, that we only bring the people who are going to tell us we're doing a good job. No, please bring me to the table and tell me I'm not doing a good job. Tell me, Linda, we love you. We actually think you are an incredible organizer. But in this moment, here's how I'm feeling about what you're doing. And let me reflect, because we also need people in our movements do not self-reflect. In
Mhm.
fact, when you try to hold somebody in our community accountable, or you try to say, wait a minute, I'm not really feeling that, this is how it's making me feel, people will say I'm being attacked. People will say I'm being targeted. Trust me, Marisa, you know this, for 22 years, I have probably been one of the most publicly challenged activists in all of the movements that there have been. Like, people have wrote columns about me in every paper. And guess what? Every once in a while, I read something, I say, you know what? This person got a whole point here. I didn't
Mhm.
even think I was doing that. You know what? I'm going to take that into account and I'm going to be better next time. But people in our movements just, and I'm not saying it's everybody. Obviously, there are good people in our movement who are just principled and have been doing good work for a long time. But we're also in a movement that gets to decide who is the most effective based on different factors that I don't always necessarily agree with. And at the end of the day, if we don't have those courageous conversations, it's not only going to fracture our movements, which is one potential consequence, but that's not even the thing we should really be worrying about, because fracturing our movement is one, but our people are going to lose more. And that's the thing we don't want to happen, because if the idea of our movement is to center and uplift the most marginalized people, if we don't get our infrastructure together, if the quote leaders can't get it together, then those are the people that are going to be harmed, not us, because we could just walk
Mhm.
away from the table. Most of us are relatively more privileged than the people in our communities that we fight for. They're the ones that are going to be harmed, and that's the consequence that I don't want to risk. But again, if we don't have those courageous conversations, those types of conversations, as you saw in a recent conference, it takes, we have to advocate, like we have to organize within our movements to even have a conversation, for example, about how this moment is impacting our movements. Like we're talking about sign-ons, get this ally, make them call the conference leads. Like, it takes a village just to incorporate this, what you're calling a courageous conversation. And even after it's already happening, there's still drama around it. And it's
Mhm.
like, why don't you just come to the table, ask your hard question? Let's see, I want to know what you're feeling. What makes these conversations so hard to have? Because at the end of the day, when we do have them, Marisa, they're not that hard. In fact, they're usually quite transformative and really inspiring, and actually take us to another place. And me, I don't want to be in the same place. I want to go to another place, even if that means I got to struggle with Marisa a little bit. Maybe Marisa's like, I need a minute from you, Linda. Like, I can't really talk to you for a little while because I'm still sitting with what you said. You know what? My heart will be a little broken, but I say, you know what? We needed this. We needed this conversation. And then I'll circle back with Marisa later and say, what did you think? What were the thoughts you had? I want to hear from you. I want to know how you're feeling about this. But we don't even get the chance to do that because we don't even have the courageous conversations.
That's right. We could keep going, but I think that's a perfect place to leave today. And thank you for this time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for this conversation. I'm walking away, lifting up the the need for grace, the need for self reflection, the need for real talk, courageous conversations, and for folks who are doing that work, holding the line, keep up the pressure. I think we are seeing shifts. We are seeing big leaps, but we still have a long way to go. Connect the dots, play a role, make a damn play.
That's
And
right.
Linda, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. It is always
Thank you.
illuminating and grounding to talk to you. And I'm sure I'll see you outside somewhere soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Solidarity with the students all over the country.
Yes.
Thank you, Linda and Marisa, for that excellent conversation. Creo que son súper importantes estos espacios de reflexión, de traernos esperanza y de traernos words of wisdom right now, because it's very complicated to know how to act, how to organize, how to feel, and even how to relate to each other. So I really hold very close el consejo de Linda of like having grace with yourself and with others around you. That was very, very beautiful and important. So muchas gracias a ambas.
And as Linda was sharing, right, this is a prolonged struggle. It doesn't start with us, but hopefully it will. I'm confident this will end in our lifetime, that we will see a free Palestine in our lifetime. And so, Linda, thank you for sharing your time, your brilliance, your analysis, and being with us here at El Calentón. You are welcome to join us anytime you'd like.
Yes, Linda, gracias por ese fuego de esperanza que trajo a este espacio, and like remembering us where we've been, because I really liked how she explained as a response to the White House expressions against students teniendo estos campamentos y estas protestas y estos sit-ins y estando fuera de sus salones de clase, incluso faculty is also joining in. I feel like her explaining y recordándonos que this is a legacy de Estados Unidos, realmente este anti-war movement, viendo cómo se está articulando nuevamente y fortaleciéndose.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the power in that is that people, young folks, and like all kinds of people que se están movilizando para esto are understanding the connections between not only politics, but only pero también nuestro economic system, y cómo también se comunica con la milicia, con lo militar, cómo se comunica con foreign policy, like seeing that all of that is connected.
See, and I hope for folks that tuned in that this podcast is giving you a lot to reflect on, and we hope that in future episodes we can continue this conversation and have future reflections. And also, for me personally, this podcast has brought back a lot of memories for me. The student organizing that's happening right now, that has happened, is super important. It's not the only space, it's not the key space for solidarity, for Palestinian resistance at all, but it is a powerful space, right? And I was in college actually a part of my campus's Students for Justice in Palestine chapter. And so I wanted to just give a shout out to any folks tuning in that are involved with SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, nationally, because I learned so much from that experience as a Chicana, as a Latinx person, as a student of color. And the biggest lesson that I took with me, that I really felt through today's episode, was one, that the university, white supremacist institutions, Zionist institutions, find solidarity so threatening. And there's a reason, right, why Fred Hampton said that we fight racism with solidarity. That was that I knew was the biggest threat that we had organizing as students from different backgrounds. I will never forget that during that time, around 2015, there was actually a Zionist director of a campus organization in California that said, and I, remember the words really clearly, right? He said, campus politics have been hijacked by students intent to conquer. The irony of those words, right? The coalition of Arab, Muslim, Latino, Asian, and gay students, they're all oppressed minorities.
Wow.
And that was what he was saying about, students organizing around Palestine at the time. And we had quite a few things to say about that, as I'm sure folks might have after hearing that. And and that's what I want to wrap up with, is just continuing to let folks know that, we want to keep having this conversation, and let us know if, Mijente can support with anything.
Yes. Thank you, Cynthia, por ese contexto y ese recordatorio de donde venimos desde nuestras luchas. Yo cierro con que me llevó mucho de la conversación el reconocimiento de que Palestina es todos los issues, un poco lo que estabas diciendo ahora mismo, nos representa el tema de housing, del cambio climático, el tema del colonialismo también, que en Puerto Rico podemos sí esos paralelos y sentirlo con lo que está pasando en Palestina, y pues obviamente es auspiciado por los Estados Unidos, así que tenemos eso también en común. Y todos esos issues, ¿verdad? En este año electoral yo creo que es importante rescatar antes de irnos, para todas las personas que están sintiendo mucho agobio, that we're in an electoral year and our options are terrible, y que nos están pidiendo un poco que ignoremos todo eso. I think it's very important what our executive director, Marisa Franco, was talking about, picking the terrain that we want to organize in. Y también darnos cuenta that there's a lot of other races, carreras políticas en esta contienda electoral, that are very important as well. Que no solamente tenemos que limitarnos, ¿verdad?, a la presidencial. And also a reflection that I don't know how to answer, ese feeling de no saber, ¿verdad?, cómo reaccionar a que un presidente por el que tú no votas, por lo menos yo no puedo votar desde Puerto Rico por un presidente, can do what they're doing with our tax money, can do what they're doing every day con el dinero de la gente, en vez de invertirlo en otras cosas. Y yo creo que ese sentido de impotencia, de feeling like you're being part of a genocide y que no puedes salirte de esa complicidad, pues para mucha gente es bien desmotivante, pero creo que la esperanza está in precisely what Marisa and Linda were talking about. Continue organizing, continue having the conversations, y no irte de la mesa o no, ¿verdad?, no defraudarte por los tiempos actuales. Así que seguimos en resistencia, seguimos en solidaridad infinita hasta que Palestina sea libre. Así que gracias a Linda, Marisa y Cynthia por acompañarme.
That's right, and that's been today's episode. Desde el río hasta el mar, Palestina será libre. So thank you so much for joining this episode of El Calentón podcast today. Remember to recruit more compas, organizers, family, friends, neighbors to consider joining our casita política, our political home here at Mijente. And you can check out mijente.net/join for more. And we'll see you soon on the next episode of El Calentón. Y no dejes que se apague.
Ay, bye.